You are tuned in to Grand Rapids Community Access Television, GRTV, Channel 24, a service of Grand Rapids Community Media Center. Welcome to the February 2019 edition of City Connection. It's the live call-in program where you, citizens of Grand Rapids, can ask your city elected official about local issues. Typically we have on City Connection Grand Rapids Mayor Rosalind Bliss, but today we have live in the studio 2nd Ward Commissioner Ruth Kelly. Commissioner Kelly is sitting in for the mayor, and to cover a number of city-related topics, we'll be taking your questions later in the show. Today we also welcome into the GRTV studios City MobileGR Director Josh Naramore. Commissioner Kelly will be speaking with Josh Naramore to provide some insights on parking and mobility considerations here in Grand Rapids, particularly in light of the city's growth. You may also be able to call in. You may have experienced some challenges when it comes to parking and mobility yourself. We'll take your calls or tweets or email. You can do this through a number of ways. Phone number is 459-4881. Email us. It's cityconnection@grcmc.org. You can also send tweets to @GRTVAccess or commenting. We can do that on GRTV's Facebook page. City Connection broadcasting live today, February 4th, 2019, with Community Media Center. I'm Linda Gellasch, and now in studio, Commissioner Ruth Kelly. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Linda. It's good to be here.
Great to have you here. Thanks for sitting in for the mayor, but you've done this a number of times. This is nothing new to you to be on City Connection, so it's great to get some updates on a few things that are going on. And just wanted to bring up, a couple things that were on the burner last time when we talked to the mayor, and one is a new police chief search that's going on, and we learned last month that consultant's been hired to do the search, but also a couple opportunities for the community to weigh in coming up.
Right, and I have those dates here if you'd like those.
Okay,
I brought that along with me, so I make sure that I could announce that.
City Manager Mark Washington is going to do some public forums where people can give some feedback.
Exactly. He's our new manager, and he wants to do things a little bit differently and be much more inclusive to hear from the community. So we have two opportunities where we want to invite the community to join in this conversation and give us feedback. One is Tuesday, February 19, and that'll be at City Commission Chambers. That's on the 9th floor, and if you do come, you can park, speaking of parking, for free. Just bring your ticket with you and it will get validated, and go up to the 9th floor, and that is, of course, Monroe and Ottawa Avenues, the government city ramp right there. And the second one is Wednesday, February 20 at Wealthy Theater, another wonderful community media venue, and that's at 1130 Wealthy, and there's on-street parking there. So encourage you all to go on the city's website. These will take place from 6 o'clock to 8 p.m., and I really encourage you to join us at those.
Okay. Well, our new city manager has a big item on his plate starting out. It is his responsibility to make that hire. It's a duty of city manager. So exactly. The idea that seeking out his new community's input on what citizens are concerned about and interested in. What do you see as some of the top priorities in searching out for a new police chief?
Well, that's one thing, of course, we want to get from the community, so I don't want to speak for everybody else, but from what we've already heard, I think we want someone who's going to be open and accessible. We are looking for the community to help us define what they want in terms of what does community policing mean. I think we want somebody, too, that is well versed in best practices around the country, that is going to be supportive of our community and our police department, both, because we have to work together. It's not us versus them. We're all in this together. So I think that we'll get some more specific detail when we hear from the community, but broadly speaking, I think that's what we're looking for.
So the city's been involved in a couple studies when it comes to policing, and talk a little bit about what steps have been taken by the City Commission to really kind of examine our local policing issues and what are best practices.
Well, you may remember a few years back when we had the 12-point plan that was actually brought to us by the community. Those initiatives were put in place. Some of that was around doing a traffic study, for example, the deployment of body cams. Those were a couple of the major items. And then out of that came a study that we engaged in with a task force, a citizen-appointed task force that the commission appointed. And that the goal of that group in working with our our police department was to work with a group called 21st Century Policing. And they had done work in areas of the country where cities were under consent decrees. But there were also many cities that decided to be more proactive. We were not under a consent decree. We have an excellent department, but we wanted to get ahead of the game and really understand the new environment around policing because of incidences that happened around the country. And of course, we're not immune to that either. So we hired them, and then out of that came one recommendation to do a deployment study. There are a couple of groups that do consulting for cities all over, actually all over the world. One is the ICMA, the International City County Management Association, and the other is national, and that's our community-oriented policing that comes out of the Justice Department. And both of those groups recommended that we look at deployment, define community policing, and really look at the workload in our police department. And we had been hearing from our own police department that they need more officers and that we need them in specific areas, for example, the detective unit. So that is not something that commissioners have the expertise in. And so we have hired this group to do an analysis of that. So this will all come together and hopefully help inform a new chief.
Okay. Well, a phrase in our lexicon that grew out of some interesting weather last week, polar vortex.
Yeah.
It was an interesting week around Grand Rapids and many parts of the Midwest for sure, other parts of the country too. We've been hearing a little bit about there's some threats of freezing and ice dams that may indicate flooding coming on the Muskegon River. Wondered if there's any concerns here in Grand Rapids with the river running right through town. The Grand River in the past has risen to a level of concern, and wondered if there's been any concern this time.
Well, it actually came up over the weekend. There were some commissioners that were communicating with our city manager and asking about that. Are we going to go from polar vortex to flooding? So he gave us an update as of yesterday in that we looked at maybe 4 to 6 inches, and it could go up as high as 10 inches, but we have a leeway up to 18, so we are in good shape. There's a lot of work that's already been done along the riverbanks. You may recall that FEMA required that we raise our, what they call freeboard, and that is basically the concrete walls, and we wanted to do a better job of that and use nature. So we have created a lot of venues along the river so that when there is flooding, it can actually go into the ground and be soaked up. So we've done a lot of work around stormwater in the city over the last few years, and we are prepared for that eventuality. We are also, we can't guarantee that. We can't predict everything in terms of the upcoming weather, and there may be areas downstream that we cannot control, but I think we're in good shape in the city. Okay. So
good
yeah,
to know.
That's good news.
You know, after lots of snow and lots of freezing and then a lot of melting, including today's temperature near 50 degrees,
right.
Ice jams and dams became an issue, so it's good to know where we stand on river levels and that sort of thing. Speaking of rivers, we got a lot of river restoration activity going on, including the city was just awarded a grant that centers on Riverside Park. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right, we're very excited about that. There's a boat launch that's over by the lagoon area, and in 2020 that's going to be upgraded to a kayak and canoe area, so there will be a dock out there, and there will also be a lot of improvements around accessibility. So we got a $150,000 grant from the state of Michigan, and we are hoping, well, we will be also expending about $80,000 out of the park millage. And the shelter there is going to get improved in the bathrooms, which is long overdue. But there's been plans to do everything we can to make it much more accessible too for those who are disabled. So I hope that we will be able to see some boating out there, canoeing and kayaking. We do have a wonderful riverbed in that area for crew, and you've probably seen both high school crew out there and even some professional groups that have come out there and used it. So
when we were talking prior to the show, you mentioned it's even a little bit known for in the crewing world that this is a great area to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was at a river cleanup that WEMIAC put on once, and I was sitting next to an individual who does crew, and he told me that this was one of the 5 rivers in the United States that are best for crew just because of the, the shape, the bedrock underneath. So, and it starts right up there in that Riverside Park area.
Okay.
So that's good news too.
All right. Well, with some of these changes that are happening, tell a little bit about where things stand on the river restoration project.
Well, because of the government shutdown, what I learned was that things may get delayed, but we are basically in the permitting stage right now. So we're not going to see a whole lot of change. We're still moving along though, for example, with the Riverside Park addition of the dock, because we are hoping to activate areas all up and down the river, both on the wet side and the dry side, which would involve the trails. So it's it'll take several years to get this done and the funding in place, but because so much of the funding is coming from the federal government, the shutdown did delay it, and we don't know what's ahead in terms of a second shutdown, which hopefully won't even happen.
Okay. Well, with government shutdown, federal government shutdown for 35 days, for that many weeks, what other effects did it have on our local activity, our local government, our local processes?
Well, I think it just slows down anything that touches our federal grants. I mean, for example, our block grants that we get, and those go to fund things, a lot of housing initiatives and so on. I think it might just delay things a little longer. We actually are quite used to that not knowing until the last minute. But I'd say probably the most notable thing is the river restoration project.
Okay. And this grant, and maybe you mentioned this one that's for the Riverside accessibility, is that a federal grant?
Let me see here. I wrote this down too on my way in. It was coming through the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, a recreation passport grant. We often get those. We've got applications in for several others. We'll see if we get them or not. They're competitive, of course. But this one was an actual award that we just learned about this week.
Excellent.
So.
Excellent. So, so I asked you about the local level, meaning at the Grand Rapids level, were any delays resulting from the shutdown or the pending? I guess there's a little bit of a threat of maybe a future one. What about at the state level? That effect? Did it trickle down, federal to state, state to local? Anything else at that level?
Nothing that was brought to our attention. I just think that whenever the federal government shuts down, it puts everybody in a state, and things slow down. The county, the city, Between that and the polar vortex, lines get longer, for example. I actually was telling you earlier, I went in to pay my property taxes today, and there was quite a long line. So I actually just thought, I'm not going to bother with it, I'll do it later. But,
okay.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
We'll catch up.
All right. Well, we've got a minute or so, and I just wondered, anything you want to mention about the ward you represent? You're second ward commissioner. Anything that's new and developing in your ward?
I'd say new and development around myself. This is my last year to have the pleasure of serving in the second ward. I'm term limited, so I'll be done at the end of this year. So people are gearing up to run, of course, for office. But no, I've just really enjoyed my tenure. It'll be almost 10 years, and I continue to meet with our organizers every month. So there are lots of things going on. You just have to drive around in the ward and you see all the construction that's going on, not just in our ward, but all over the city. So there are continuous challenges around development. People want to know what's going on, and are these buildings going to get filled, and is it going to affect my neighborhood if there's a development, and how. So I'd say in the last 3 years I have been busier than ever just going to meetings around projects that are popping up. And of course there are many parking changes, which we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes.
Great. Well, we will take a quick break because we'll be back then, and we'll talk with MobileGR's director, that is Josh Naramore, up next here on City Connection, GRTV.
Why do local businesses spend their marketing dollars with Community Media Center? Because it's more than just passive advertising. It is an investment in the community that is eager to invest in you. The Community Media Center makes Grand Rapids vital. We collaborate with local businesses and support events in West Michigan. Inclusive. We amplify local voices that tell the diverse and ever-changing stories of our community. Creative. We encourage artists to showcase and expand their talents and to shape the look and sound of Grand Rapids. Marketing with the CMC will let our community know who you are and increase brand recognition for your business. At the end of the day, we are a resource that will keep you connected to the community. Share your message with diverse audiences by underwriting with WYCE, GRTV, Wealthy Theater, and the Rapidian. Join us in building a stronger community through media. Contact us at marketing@grcmc.org.
West Michigan's biggest night of music returns. It's the 20th annual WICE Jammy Awards, Friday, February 8th at the Intersection. Jammy's 20 features over 30 Michigan bands on 4 stages, with award presentations for Best Album of 2018, Best Album by a New Artist, Song of the Year, the Listener's Choice Awards, and much more. For the first time in the event's history, one stage will be dedicated to an open mic where you can play at the Jammies. All ages are welcome, doors open at 5:30 p.m. and, as always, Jammies is free with a $5 suggested donation at the door. Information and complete Jammies 20 lineup is at our website, wice.org. Jammies is made possible with support from Founders Brewing Company, On-Stage Services, Aria Stage and Sound Technology, Culinary Cultivations, Kitchen Sage, and Section Live. Special thanks to our award sponsor, Patriot Realty.
Josh Naramore,
Yes.
welcome.
Glad
I
to
just
be here.
want to invite you to talk to us today about parking on City Connection. So
Yeah.
that's a big topic in the city. So
Yes.
where would you like to start?
Probably, I think the first thing to say is that just recognizing that parking is very personal,
Yes.
and it's a topic that different people have different reactions, and also that we're trying to always balance the interests of those who live in the community and those who come in for work or for play. So it's just always trying to balance all of those interests. And I think beyond it being personal, I think also really educating people that we don't charge for parking just to make money. We do that in order to make sure that it's available to help support the growing businesses that we have.
Right. Well, I think that's a real misconception as a commissioner hearing from constituents. When fees go up or there are new meters, I do actually hear that. Is the city just trying to make money? But it's illegal for us to do that, isn't it?
Yes, under current state laws, we can't use it just to generate profit. We have to actually show that we're using it to cover costs. And as a city, we're growing, and there are a lot of different things that we're trying to invest in from a parking side as well as from a mobility standpoint to help people move throughout the community. Which, just to talk about that a little bit too, is we're really excited about the newly rebranded Dash system that exists in the downtown area. It's now 7 days a week. It comes every 7 minutes, and it runs late night till 1 a.m. on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. So that's a way in which we're trying to get people to try the bus out that might not otherwise if they have to pay for it. But also it allows people who are coming into downtown to experience Grand Rapids in a different way.
Right.
So if you're going to Van Andel Arena, there's different options for you on the near west side over here where we are, where you can park for $2.
Right.
Ride the bus for free over to a show instead of paying $12 closer to the arena.
Exactly.
So it's just ways in which we're trying to provide more opportunities for that, as well as the growth in trying to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety in the community. A number
Right.
of people rely on that as well. But I think the biggest thing is, since we're a growing city, we've made a lot of technology changes over the
Right.
last couple of years, of which there's been some confusion and some consternation amongst the general public. And so we're always trying to do better, and that's why we like to get feedback from people as much as possible. And so hoping we'll get some great questions tonight about that.
Okay, good. Well, the Dash is something I use quite often. It's convenient, and I recommend it to people who live in the nearby downtown neighborhoods. Take a walk for a couple blocks and then take the Dash in, and you won't have to pay for parking. And where can they find the hours for that if they don't remember?
So there's two best ways. Is you can go to grandrapidsmi.gov/dash, and there's some resources as well as a PDF of a map of all of our parking resources as well as the Dash. And then we actually recommend people to download on your smartphone, if you have the time, Transit app, which is free and it's available, and it'll actually tell you in real time how to use both the Rapid system as well as how to navigate the Dash system.
Excellent.
So those are two really easy ways for people to be able to do that. And then you can always come visit our office and get a print map and print resources, and we're located at the 50 Ottawa, at the corner of Ottawa and Lewis, right across from the street from Leo's,
Right.
in the main floor of the Ottawa Fulton parking structure.
Good to know. Good to
Yeah.
know. Yeah. People might not know, but the Dash has been changed so that you can go all the way from the north to the south and east to the west. It's so much more convenient. But there's another bus too that's available. Can you talk about that, Bus 19?
Yes. So along with the Dash changes, we also are partnered with Spectrum Health and the Rapid. So now residents of the Midtown neighborhood out on Michigan Street, basically out to Plymouth, all the way here to the near west side, that is also fareless. That operates about every 15 minutes, and that's Monday through Friday only, and it goes to about 10:30 at night.
Okay.
But that's also an opportunity for those who live and work downtown, and also for some residents out there as well to take advantage of that if they work downtown. And then on top of that, we also had partnered with the Rapid on the Silver Line. So the Silver Line is also fareless throughout downtown, so you can get on the bus and ride that as well.
Great. Lots of
Yeah.
ways to access downtown.
There definitely
For free. Free is good, right? We all like free.
Yes.
Well, it's not free, but it is, it's supported with federal funding and with city funding, but you don't have to pay the fare on the bus, so that's
Right.
really good. So talk a little bit about parking and the new Mo2 program and,
Sure.
and that technology. I hear a lot of, I get a lot of questions about it, how to download it and how to use it.
So the city transitioned to Mo2 a little bit earlier this year, and we had Park Mobile
Right.
for a very long time. And Mo2 is actually powered by Passport, which is a competing brand that's based in North Carolina. We made that tough decision after we'd had Park Mobile for 9 years. We were actually the first city in North America to have
Really?
Park Mobile. Yep, it's a Dutch company that came over to the United States, and so we were the first to have it, and we went through many changes associated with it. We as a department and a city, we're trying to be more responsive to look at things that do what we want it to do today, but can also grow with us as a community. So one of the benefits that Passport and Mo2 has is it offers payment for people who don't have a credit card, which was
Great.
something that was very, very important to us as we're
Right.
looking through the lens of if you're unbanked populations. So you actually have the ability to download it and use it on a smartphone, but you can actually come into our office and use cash to load the wallet associated with that.
Okay.
So that was a very important piece. A second one is it natively translates into Spanish and other languages.
Wow.
So
Park
Park
Mobile
Mobile
did-
did not.
Okay.
And so that was something that we saw as we have a growing Latino population in the city. So with Spanish continuing to be and making more of our resources available in a different language. And then lastly, this application also has the ability to pay for as we grow with other options. So if we have bike share or transit, it can be integrated into the new Wave card that the Rapid has launched. And that's something that we've kind of talked about as a little
Yeah.
bit further down the line for a deployment. But as we grow, that's one of the reasons why we made that change.
So in other words, you could have one password in one card instead of multiple?
Yes.
That is absolutely wonderful news.
And
Yeah.
we're headed in that general direction, and this was
Great.
sort of a first step. And I will say that the way that it launched and sort of the original first probably month of it, there were some issues that people had with the application that weren't with the application itself. It's how we as a city had set it up from a policy perspective. So it was people could only park for 2 hours. They couldn't increase or add more time because the city ordinance actually says you can only park for 2 hours or less at different on-street spaces. So we were trying to honor that. We had planned on making that transition with Park Mobile, and so we've changed that since then. We've also, having a local branded application allows us to make more modifications to it that support our users here locally.
Okay,
With Park
so-
Mobile, they could roll out something like reserve a parking space. Well, that's not available in Grand Rapids, but
Oh, that'd be
people who
confusing.
it got a little bit confusing when they would roll out new options. So here locally, we have control over it. And so as we're getting more feedback from users, we tried to make as many of those changes as possible. We haven't gotten all of them integrated, but that's something that we're always looking forward to doing.
So where do people go to look at those changes? Back to the website?
So really, it's going back to the website. We've also tried to provide those updates when there are various upgrades that go out to the application itself. And then we've tried to be responsive to the comments we receive. But I always tell people to please email us at mobilegr@grcity.us if you have any issues, or contact us through 311, because we're always trying to document. It may be something that people want to see as an upgrade in the future. And we may not be able to do it right now, but we may be looking to do that. Another great example is fleet management. We have a lot of companies like Gordon Food Service, FedEx, UPS that have a lot of vehicles out there. Park Mobile had a fleet management application, and Mo2 does not currently, but we're working to be able to administer that to better serve customers like that. So it's really just getting an idea of where the general public wants to see more changes that are made.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about Mo2 in the neighborhoods versus Mo2 downtown?
Yes. So we have also started expanding some of the parking pay stations that people see, as well as Mo2. The biggest change that happened most recently was here on the near west side, as well as in Uptown, which is all the areas around Easttown, Cherry Street, Wealthy Street, and the businesses over there in Fulton Street. We've actually started to transition in some of our neighborhood areas to pay by license plate, and one zone for the entirety of the area, instead of downtown where you would pay by individual space.
Okay.
And the reason for making this change outside is if you are in Uptown and you're in one area, if you're in Easttown and you're at Yesterdog, and then you leave and you want to go to someplace over on Wealthy Street, you'd have the ability to only pay once, and it's always tied to your license plate. You just have to remember one number.
That's good, because I have heard from people that they don't want to have to stop and pay again, and they're shopping in their own neighborhood. So you can just drive down the street and you're in the same zone and you don't have to pay more unless you're staying longer.
That's correct. And we have not done that in downtown because there's more of a need for a pay by space, because there's so much construction, and we want construction contractors and other folks who need to be able to reserve the space to be able to do that, and we have to be in the pay by individual space. But the future in the long term is to go by pay by license plate. It's easier, it's more cost effective. Yeah, and eventually even downtown. It's just, it's the future of where a lot of different cities are going. It's easier to manage, and it's easier for customer because you only have to remember one thing. You only have to remember one zone and your license plate, either through the Mo2 application or through the pay stations themselves.
Good.
And so I think the biggest thing we want to communicate to people, that change is very hard, and we've been trying to communicate these changes. But we're always wanting to get feedback and trying to do more information and outreach. But the pay stations, we find, offer a little bit of a benefit to the customer, whether you're in the neighborhood and you can use it to pay by license plate, or you're downtown and you use it to pay by space. You can print a receipt if you're a business and you want to get reimbursed for that. It also allows you to use credit cards. So not everybody carries change, and so with those individual meters that existed out in some of the neighborhood areas, you didn't have the ability to pay other than using the pay by cell application or coin. So now you can use a credit card, and so we're always trying to offer more payment options for people to find out what works best for them.
Great. One size doesn't fit all, right?
That's right.
So that's wonderful. And it's good to know, too, to encourage people, if you do have questions, just go ahead and email you, and they'll get the answers.
Yes, we have lots of great information at grandrapidsmi.gov.
So talk a little bit about the reason for, I know, for keeping the cars moving so that people don't stay in the same place all day. What are you hearing from the businesses about why they want that?
So it differs in different areas across the city, but the general thing that we're trying to do is you want to facilitate turnover. If it's free and unregulated and there is no payment for it, there's nothing to stop someone from parking there for a week or 2 weeks at a time. As evidenced by what we just saw during the snowstorm, is a lot of people won't move their car, which was creating issues with snow plowing. Well, in a lot of the areas where we had metered parking, we don't have as many of those issues, and that's because we're facilitating turnover. And so the idea is you always want a level of space available so that people can go to a business. Because you never want that to be a deterrent from someone coming to an area. You'll see that in various areas of the city where sometimes at night and on the weekends it's difficult to find a parking space, and there's limited options to get there. So the idea is you price it so that you get the turnover. So there's about 15 to 20% of parking is available.
Okay, well, this has been really enlightening. I know that you also oversee traffic and bicycles. That's probably a topic for a different day.
Yes.
But I would just encourage everybody to contact the city, MobileGR, and get those answers to those questions. So thank you so much for being here and answering a multitude of them today.
Great, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Did you know that you're watching GRTV right now? That's right, this show, Weekly View, is airing on Grand Rapids' own public access station. And the great thing about a public access station is that you can put your video on GRTV too. Your video about woodworking, politics, movies, comics, parrots, economics, anything. It can all go on GRTV. And if you don't have a video yet, we can help you there too. We have classes that are super cheap and equipment you can use for free. Go to the GRTV website, grtv.org/classes, or give us a call at 616-459-4788 to sign up. You can even stop by for a free tour anytime, Monday, Wednesday, or Friday from 12 to 9. We're located at 711 Bridge Street, right above the Bridge Street Library. GRTV is your place to find local shows made by local producers. And if you turn in your own show, you can watch yourself.
With Commissioner Ruth Kelly. Also, we have in the studio still with us. We got a few questions for Josh Naramore. It's MobileGR Director, and we're going to ask a few more things, including the questions that have already come in. And the first one has to do a little bit with Motu app, that app that you were discussing a little bit. And there's a question maybe for some clarity on how it works. It says, myself and others, this is from Michael, says, myself and others are confused by the zone number versus the space number. Why are there two numbers, and is it possible to make just one number and have it more visible maybe from inside the car even?
That is a really great question. And so the reason why we have two different numbers is it's a way for us to locate where it is within the city. And one of the things we have recently made a change to is you enter in a zone number currently. That's to make sure we get the real-time information to the parking enforcement so we don't write a ticket erroneous, like in error, which we had some issues with last fall, which we've since kind of worked on. We're actually in the process for going back so that you will only have to remember your space number when you're in the downtown or you're up along Plainfield. But the rest of the city, as I was mentioning, will be zone-based. And that's because it's tied to your license plate and it's a much larger geographic area. So right now for downtown, you will eventually, and we're hoping that that change will go out in the next week or two to make it much simpler for the customer. So you will be able to see the big number that's posted on the sign on the street. So that was a change that was kind of in terms of trying to integrate a bunch of software simultaneously. But it's a great question, and it's something that we're trying to work on to simplify it for the customer. So you only have to know the one number.
Okay, and then a follow-up to that. This is a question as well from Dali, and it says, how do I suggest improvements to Motu that I'd like to see? Maybe some customer feedback.
Oh no, that's great. Email us at mobilegr@grcity.us. There's about 8 different staff people that are regular monitoring that. And so we're actually trying to get more people to contact us that way so we can start developing sort of a list of things that people want to see in future upgrades to the system. And if it's something that we can't do right now, we'd still like the feedback on ways in which we can better improve the customer experience.
Okay, and then I want to go back to something you had said when you were and Commissioner Kelly were talking, and I believe you said that there's 2-hour limits when you're in one of these zones, and then also the idea of moving throughout a zone and wondering if that 2-hour limit then is in place. Let's say I parked in front of Wealthy Theater, put in 2 hours worth of time, but I'm going to end up down the street at Yesterdog and maybe at another location and all that. You're not really sitting in the same spot for 2 hours, but you're within a zone. How does that work?
If you use the Motu application, you can continue to add time. within the app itself. We've not set it up so that at 2 hours it times you out. We did initially, but that was a policy decision we had made, and so we've since changed that so people can extend time. If you're using the pay station itself, you'd have to go to another pay station to log in and enter your information, but that's a benefit to using Motu. You can control how much time you have and always make sure that you have an active parking session. Okay. So currently that is set up to be done that way.
Okay. Some other questions having to do with the mobile part, MobileGR. It's not just parking, but a little bit about, you mentioned the bike share. Tell us a little bit about where things stand with that.
So the city finished and worked with a bunch of partners to do a bike share feasibility study, which we finished about 6 months ago. And so we're currently in the process of working on how to accommodate a bike share system, as well as the proliferation of e-scooters, electric scooters, that you've seen in a number of cities in the state of Michigan. They are in Lansing. Detroit has been sort of the biggest test case in the state, but across the country. And it's something that's changed. They didn't exist about a year ago. They've only been around for about a year. And you'll see a lot of different reports and studies that have been out there. So we're currently working through that internally, and we hope to have something like this for the community to test out for a period of time as early as this spring. And that's something that we're reacting to that's just happening, but we also know that these operators are going to come whether the city likes them to or not. So how can we make sure that they are doing the best things to meet the spirit of the goals that the commission and that we as a community have set for ourselves? How do we make sure they're distributed across the neighborhoods equally, that access, prevent street clutter, really address as many of those concerns as possible. So we're working right now while it's winter time, and that we have the luxury of being able to work on this behind the scenes, and then we're working with new city manager Washington on rolling out a process, hopefully within the next couple months.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of other things about mobility that we think of parking, and that's what you're hearing a lot about. Tell us how this past week went with snow removal being an issue and so many spaces you could hardly get in and out of. How did that go? So
I'm sure a lot of people saw this, we actually didn't do any parking enforcement, or really were not doing anything because it was difficult not only for our staff to be out in those elements as well as just the general public, and it's one less thing that we wanted people who are having to be out in the elements to worry about. I will say that it really impacted us with we still had to make sure staff were there for things like the auto show, because we also provide that resource for special events. And also we had to make sure that the customers that were still having to rely on parking services, we still had security and other staff, but we also managed the city's signal system as well, and also like barricading and signage. So those individuals were still out there cleaning snow out of signal heads and making sure that people were safe while they were out there driving. And it was a really great team effort by all the city departments that were involved. I think the general public doesn't quite understand how much is involved behind the scenes to make sure, from police to fire to James Hurt and the public works operators that have been working basically continuously for the last week or so.
Then a little bit about, I guess this was a good example of what happens when people don't honor the parking alternative sides of the street and when snow can't be removed. Did you find a lot of that?
There was a tremendous amount of that, and our department does not do the parking enforcement for that. That's the police department, and I do know the police department wrote an extensive amount of odd and even parking tickets, and I know that there was a public relations campaign also that they were having to tow vehicles in some cases because they needed to be able to get to the curb to safely plow some of the areas of the city. So I think that's something that we're going to talk about a little bit more internally after winter is over, about some of the pros and cons to odd and even. I know Commissioner Kelly has asked about this in the past as well. It's very difficult, I think, for people to continue to do that, and I think the education still needs to happen. We've noticed in areas like my neighborhood in Midtown, a number of renters that are turning over and maybe are new to the community and don't fully understand it, or that disabled vehicles, what do you do in the case of that? And so I think educating people on the resources that are available if they need help to move their car, but then also just the general nature of odd and even and why it's so important is just indicated in the last week, why people need to adhere to that ordinance. So.
And one other question that's a little bit off of what we were just talking about, but how does it work when it comes to residents in an area and being able to still park when you've got zoning near you that is maybe driving people to your street parking versus the parking spaces? Even when it comes to a park itself, do we anticipate if it's a park that's near say, a zone paid parking area, that it's going to be an issue for that?
We're currently monitoring that across the city. So there's a tool in the toolbox called Residential Parking Permit Program. It costs $30 a year, $15 every 6 months. And there's only one neighborhood in the city that currently has it. It's the Noble neighborhood, Neighbors of Belknap Lookout, just north of 196. But we're actually deploying 2 other ones. There's actually one not too far from here on Alabama, a small stretch there, because there are some issues with the apartment buildings over there and metered parking and where people are going. So that's something that we're kind of working towards. So we're actually now in the process of setting up a way to count all cars across the whole city throughout the neighborhoods at least once a year. Then that information will help the Planning Commission and the planners that put together staff reports to say what's really the parking capacity in a neighborhood. So when a new development comes online, how could you have a really informed conversation about it? Because a lot of residents will tell you that there's not enough parking, but what does the data really say about what is the true availability of parking? So that's something that we've made some changes to, and we'd love to hear feedback from residents as we look to potentially expand that program.
Okay. And then Commissioner Kelly, what were your concerns when it has to do with odd and even, or what are some of the discussions that center on odd even parking when it comes to the winter months?
Well, some people want it on their street and they don't have it, and then they can go out and petition their neighborhood, and then there's a review to see if it makes sense doing it. Some people want to get rid of it, some people want it. So it's really all across the board, and again, this is why it's so important to do this data and have that available to explain that to people. So whether it's, that for snow plowing or whether it's about odd even, we really have to use the data. Noble, that Josh just mentioned, loves their residential parking permit program. They were the beta testers. They were the original group that employed that, and it was recently expanded there as well. And that was because so many students and employees from Spectrum and Grand Valley were crossing over the highway and parking in the neighborhood, and so many houses did not even have off-street parking. So they really did the city a service by employing that, so that we learned a lot from that, and now we are just recognizing that we can probably do these counts ahead of time and then inform the neighborhood about whether or not it makes sense to when it is time to pull the trigger and do an RPP, residential permit program.
Okay. A last question for you is,
Sure.
You talked a little bit about rolling out new changes and new app adjustments, just various different things. What's your best way of communicating, getting the word out to the community when you do that? Not everybody is maybe surfing the city's website and always visiting there.
So I'll be honest, we continue to struggle with the best way to do that, because you can't reach everybody. Because with parking, oftentimes it's people that come to the community that aren't here every single day versus changes that impact a resident or a business. So when we did parking expansion and changed sort of the metering, we did a lot of canvassing, we did a lot of mailers. We found that was one of the best ways to try to reach people. And when we do a new area, we always are flyering cars instead of writing tickets to let them know about some of the changes. But really the best way for people to be able to reach us with Mo2 is to email us at MobileGR@GRCity. But when we do push notifications, we're working to build that into the application so that if a new change is coming, if you're a user, it would just show up when you log into the application and say, hey, this has changed since the last time. We haven't been able to 100% figure that out yet, but that's one of the struggles we've had. But that's what we're working on with the change I mentioned to you, where we're going to go back to space number in downtown. That would be something that would alert you on your phone if you're a user of the application.
Okay.
So.
Josh Naramore is Director of MobileGR with the City of Grand Rapids. Thanks for being on the show with us today.
Great. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. City Connection will be right back after this break.
The Rapidian for the community provides an alternative.
To be the eyes of somebody who's not there.
It's more honest, more authentic, and more true.
And you do have the freedom to talk about things because they're things that need to be talked about, not because they'll get readers or viewers or clicks.
Sometimes it feels intimidating to write a news story or to write a story about a community issue. What I love about the Rapidian is that they make it really simple and easy.
So it's not like you have to meet this deadline. by this time.
I'll be eating a sandwich in one hand and then I'm like typing in the other.
I love the freedom to be able to write from wherever.
I think it's a really powerful experience when people are able to tell their story and to be heard.
Anyone can have a voice.
Anybody can speak.
It's a platform for the community to tell its own story in a very authentic way, and that's powerful.
The community has to be involved in order for it to be sustainable. And so it tells you something about our community.
Welcome back to City Connection, February edition. I'm in studio with Commissioner Ruth Kelly, and we just had a great visit with Josh Naramore, MobileGR at the City of Grand Rapids. A little bit about parking, a little bit about mobility, lots of great information there. Now we've got to take a turn and we're going to look at some of your general questions that you've been asking, and we've got a few here. It says, what was the impact, and specifically the economic impact, of so many businesses and the city being closed for almost a week during the polar vortex? That's from Rhea asking us this. Hard to put a number to it, but tell us a little bit about what you've seen.
Well, yeah, we don't have any numbers, at least not at this point, but there certainly was an impact. I don't remember a time ever when the City Hall was closed down. We even skipped our night meeting because the conditions were so bad that we didn't want people coming downtown for an evening meeting, and they probably wouldn't have. So we'll finish up that business at our next meeting next week, Tuesday. But yeah, certainly there was an impact, because as soon as you have to get all those plows out there, you know, that's going to cost the city money, and the salt, and the police department's got to get out there and tow cars, as we heard Josh talk about. We just haven't quantified it yet. But you have periods of time where there's no snow, and then we're always kind of happy because it's going to
save a little money.
Save a little money, and then all of a sudden you get a polar vortex. Who's ever heard of that? But hopefully that won't be our new reality.
Yeah. Right. So a little bit of what goes into the decision of closing the city? You said you've never heard of that before. How did the conclusion come about?
Well, we got feedback from those who are out there plowing the snow from our police department. We, Grand Rapids Public always communicates with the city, so that we try to make sure that if they were going to close, they wouldn't be open, and then we would not be open. County also closed, and then we were getting feedback from the state of Michigan. So yeah, when we couldn't even get up and down, even our city manager couldn't get up and down Michigan Hill, we knew that the conditions were so bad. And of course the National Weather Service was giving us all these updates and warning us to stay inside. The temperature was, of course, one of the biggest factors.
Yeah, and then Michigan Hill was closed. Ever heard of that before?
You know, I think that has happened before, rarely, but cars were sliding down sideways, so yeah, we had to close that, and I know the manager had a hard time getting into work. I think the mayor had to pick him up.
Oh, okay, all right. Oh, interesting. All right, well, that's a great question there. Harkening back to Josh's conversation with us, we've got a comment from Nate that says an annual parking pass sounds great. So there's some feedback there that idea would be appealing at least to one citizen. Wanted to see what else do we have.
Yeah, if he's talking about residential parking, that's basically what that's all about.
It is an annual.
Yes.
Great.
And it's not expensive.
$30 a year or something like that? I believe I read that.
Right.
All right, I have another question. This one comes from a local business. Corridor Coffee is wondering how do you think we have room on the west side for more redevelopment? It really has been a dramatic change over the last year and a half or so here on the west side.
Well, I think that if you go up and down these streets, you still are seeing some buildings that need redevelopment. They need upgrading. I know it's getting crowded, and it feels that way, especially around parking. But there are some zoning changes that happened a couple of years ago over by the Y, and we saw Ferris move to a new location, and Grand Valley move in. So I think you'll see some shuffling around like that when some businesses want to expand. But we still have a number of buildings in the city that are very, very old. It's just the challenge, and again, is going back to what Josh Naramore said about the data and figuring out how do we manage it all, because we want to make sure there's enough space for parking and there's enough space for living and there's enough space for business. So it all has to come together, and fortunately we have technology tools that we didn't have years ago to actually analyze those numbers.
Okay. Want to dive into a larger question that has to do at a federal policy level and the Federal Communications Commission. A number of things going on at that level. There's a lot of citizen feedback on some of the decisions, including net neutrality, kind of the potential loss of that, but even something that threatens this platform here that we're actually doing the show on,
Yes.
public access TV, community access television, exists because a decision back when cable television first started that those people, those businesses making money on these platforms owe something back to the community where they're running these cables, where they're running these lines. And there's actually rules change in the works, in the plans at the FCC level that would maybe not require that level of paying for those platforms. Paying back to the city or the communities where these are happening.
Right.
I know the city's keeping an eye on that because this is money that comes to the city, then passes on to organizations such as Community Media Center.
Exactly. We want you to be able to have programs like this so that the public can learn about what's going on in the city. And we all know that we've seen the demise of newspapers all across the country. So it's getting more and more difficult for the city to get the word out to people. This is, of course, why we have upgraded our own website and our communication systems. But for the media center, I think you've nailed it. You know, the impact on this would be tremendous if these rule changes happen and AT&T and Comcast and so on don't have to pay back to the community that they are getting money from as we all purchase their services. It could be the demise of a program like this. And I know that, I invested in this in the Community Media Center in the 80s. My husband and I bought a chair at the theater. I think I pointed out to you once at the Wealthy Theater. And it's just such a value for us to be able to communicate with each other about what's going on locally that I would encourage people to write their congresspersons. This is a national issue, and encourage you to reach out to your senators and representatives and express to them the value of these programs and ask them to communicate that to the FCC.
We were talking a little bit before we actually went on air, and one of the harder hit segments of the community could very well be maybe the senior community, because there are workarounds in a sense where you can see video, you can maybe watch television through streaming and that sort of thing. It doesn't have the local content for sure, even that workaround, and it's less likely that senior citizens are going to be able to make that transition from cable TV where they're seeing their local information, let alone newspapers and even the local content that you might find on broadcast. Is just at the broadcast level is just not available anymore. Word is Detroit newspapers are possibly coming under the same ownership and may even diminish a bit there. We've heard even the local community newspapers are, at least to a degree, ending. So there's a lot that's going away. This would be another hit to that. The informed citizenry aspect of making wise decisions as citizens, and when it comes to voting, when it comes to participation in your local government, would be an aspect lost.
Absolutely, and unfortunately, I've done some reading about what's going on at the FCC level too, in terms of they're not enforcing rules around local television stations in the nation. Because traditionally, one entity, one person could not purchase a whole lot of local television stations because they could control the message. And those rules have not been enforced. So I think it's just critical. People, I think, don't realize how much is going on, and we're just not aware. And then, of course, how do we find out? It's through these local channels like this. But again, it's important. I mean, this nation was based on our Bill of Rights, including free speech. And if we don't know what's going on, we cannot make informed decisions about who we elect and policy changes that need to be made. So I think that this is a critical issue, and I would encourage, again, you to bring this up at every opportunity that you have, Linda, to get the word out, including asking people to contact their legislators about this, because it's that body, Congress, that can do something about putting pressure on the the FCC board, and bringing us back to that value that we believe in, which is freedom of speech.
You had mentioned how you've supported Community Media Center, you and your husband contributed to the level of having a chair at Wealthy Theater, and I just wanted to make that tie-in together because some of this very money helps support Wealthy Theater in terms of we can broadcast from there. We can broadcast from there. We are a co-op model here at Community Media Center where we share space as a radio station, a television station, other services for nonprofits. So it's a broader impact than simply maybe this very channel, which is very critical as well.
Exactly, right.
I wanted to close with you telling us a little bit about when you leave office, what are your plans? How will you be engaged in Grand Rapids? What will you do?
I started many years ago as a community organizer, and when I got to be on the commission, I felt like I still am. I just get to vote. So I'm sure I'll stay in touch with all of my colleagues, but I also want to spend more time with my family. My family's been great because it is a sacrifice. I don't get to spend the time with my children and grandchildren that I would like to, so I'm really looking forward to that. And hopefully doing a little traveling and a whole lot more reading of novels, because I've been reading expository text ever since I got on the commission to keep up with policy making around the country, the state, and the city. And I really enjoy that. I'm sure I won't stop that, but I also hope to support anybody else who takes my place.
Okay.
So.
And then the other thing I was going to ask you is, with this last year, the majority of a year left, some objectives you like to see accomplished, some goals that you're in the middle of right now and you really hope to see to the finish?
Well, public safety, of course, is on everybody's radar, and housing. I think those are two of the things I've been engaged in. I've been concerned about affordability of housing, and particularly about moving forward in every way we can mixed income housing that reflects the neighborhoods that we all live in. So from the college students trying to pay off their loans to the senior citizen who wants to stay in their community but maybe can't keep up a single family home anymore. I want to see various housing types around the city. And so that will all lead into the master planning process. That might be a place where I get involved when I'm off the commission. So I want to see us be able to provide those housing opportunities for people, affordable at every stage of life. And then in public safety, I think one of the goals that I had was to get citizens involved on our public safety committee, which traditionally just had a commissioner from each ward. Now we have civilians as well, so that we can continue to have these great conversations we've been having with our police department and support them in the work that they do, because everybody's got to step up to the plate and understand this and make informed decisions. So, so I think those are two big areas.
All right. Well, Commissioner Ruth Kelly, representing the 2nd Ward, thanks for joining us on City Connection here on GRTV Livewire. We hope to see you again in this chair next time that the mayor needs a sub. Great having you here because it's a great new perspective on a lot of information. Thank you for this.
No problem. It was a delight. Thanks, Linda.
City Connection here on GRTV Livewire, Channel 24.